I'm going to start talking about, just to put it in context about why we agreed to a short-term disability plan. It was very difficult, let me tell you, to agree to this. We had fought it, and we had prepared our members to fight it, and they were quite willing to fight against the short-term disability plan. One of the major reasons why we went on strike was due to the short-term disability plan. When Canada Post came to the bargaining table with it, we were the only group of workers who did not have the short-term disability plan. They had either imposed it, arbitrated it, or bargained it with the other unions and with their management exempt. They came to us in bargaining with a whole host of rollbacks. On our pension plan, they wanted a defined contribution pension plan. Post-retirement benefits, they wanted to get rid of that. They wanted this short-term disability plan. So we fought it as well as we could. One of the things that Canada Post did, and I'm sure your employer will be doing this whenever you're in bargaining, is they would bring up comparators of what the average amount of sick leave is for that other workers are taking. Well, what they kept comparing us to are workers who didn't have any sick leave. That if you were off work due to illness, you wouldn't get paid. Well, of course you're not going to use as much sick leave as somebody who does get paid. So we thought that was an unfair comparison. But as you know, we were legislated back to work. Not the first time that we've been legislated back to work, but the legislation was completely corrupt and completely biased. It was final offer selection, so it was winner take all. It also tied the arbitrators' hands that they had to look at specific things, and we felt that if the arbitrator was following the legislation, the arbitrator would have no choice but to accept Canada Post's offer. But we still were prepared. We were going to fight it out, and we did a lot of research on different short-term disability plans within other unionized workforce. And so we were able, the government appointed an arbitrator. We were able to punt him out. He was unilingual. Our collective agreement is official in both languages. We negotiate at the same time, and we felt that you can't do that. We can't make presentations in the language of our choice. So we were able to punt him out. Then the next arbitrator that they selected was Guy Dufour, who was very involved in the forming of the new Conservative Party, of bringing the Conservatives and the Reform together. And we were successful to punt him out, saying, this guy's biased, right? This is the same group that legislated back to work, and now he's going to decide the collective agreement. So we were successful in that. So by getting those two punted out, there was a definite end to this collective agreement. So we were able to convince Canada Post to come back to the bargaining table. But we were in a weak position, and we knew it. And so we still negotiated a collective agreement. We negotiated a collective agreement that had a short-term disability plan, despite us saying we wouldn't take it. But we were able to maintain our defined benefit pension plan, our post-retirement benefits.
Our holidays.
Our holidays, yeah. They wanted
a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, basically got our collective agreement. So what we were able to negotiate for a short-term disability plan, it is a better plan that the other unions have within Canada Post. But it's not one of the best short-term disability plans from what we've been reviewing. It was basically a middle-of-the-road short-term disability plan. You have 30 weeks, once you're approved for short-term disability, you have 30 weeks of coverage. And it with a 7 calendar day waiting period. There's some qualifications that if you're hospitalized or if you have an accident, there is no waiting period. But basically, there is a 7-day calendar waiting period. It's paid at 70% of your regular wage while you're off. And it's a combination of, for the first 15 or 16 weeks, depending on if you have a waiting period, you're paid strictly from Canada Post. The last part is a combination of Canada Post and EI sick benefit. If you had sick leave credits from the prior collective agreement, you can use those credits for top-up credits to get you paid at 100% during your absence. If you don't, it's strictly 70%. We also have 2 levels of appeal. One is an internal level of appeal. So Canada Post, their disability management provider, is Great West Life Moreau Chappelle. And the first level of appeal is basically an internal level of appeal. So it's basically them asking themselves if they agree with it themselves. So it's like, Kathy, do you agree with yourself? Yes, Kathy, I do. And then your appeal is heard. You have the ability, however, to provide more medical information. The second level of appeal is the final level of appeal, and that is with an independent medical physician. What is different in our plan that the other unions have for their plan is that under the Canada Post plan for the other unions, it's an occupational health specialist, occupational health doctor that hears your appeal. We convinced Canada Post that that didn't make sense to us, that how can the same person adjudicate whether you should be off due to a mental health issue or whether you should be off due to a broken leg. And so for us, we have a list of different specialists in different specialized fields so that the parties have to agree on who the independent medical physician will be that would hear the final review, and they will make that decision. And this has proved to be very beneficial. We have recently one of our appeals that happened before we got the list together. The doctor who was an occupational health specialist was dealing with a mental health issue and basically said, I don't have expertise to be able to say whether this person is able to come back to work due to their mental health issue, and wanted to talk to a psychiatrist who specializes in people coming back to work. And so we were able to say, no, we're going to move it into the list of physicians that we've agreed to and have a specialist make that determination. So the appeal process, we have approximately close to 5% of all short-term disability claims wind up in the final level of appeal process. And so what we've been having to do, and we actually have a session on Wednesday, it's training a lot of our advocates, a lot of our people in the regional offices of how to do these appeals, because it is something different, something that not a lot of us have experience with. And what we're seeing is that this is costing the union a lot more money than we expected. We're having to, in order to prepare for an appeal, we have to consult with medical physicians and get reports from them. So that's costly. Then we're having to pay half the fees of the doctor who does the review. Now, one of the things that, again, is different from what the other unions had in their plan, and this isn't a criticism with the other unions, they were not in as strong a position as we were in bargaining. I mean, if we stop working, the mail stops moving. And we had to wind up negotiating a short-term disability. So there's no criticism whatsoever with the other unions. But one of the plans that they had is that it's the employee that makes the decision whether to appeal or not. Canada Post wanted complete control away from the union. It's clear you also can't grieve. It's got to go through this appeal process, but they wanted complete control away from the union. We were able to show them that that it didn't make sense that the union wouldn't have, especially if we're paying for half the cost of this appeal, why we wouldn't have a say of whether it should go. And we said, what does a member have to lose? I mean, if I was the member, of course I'd be saying take it to the final level appeal, even if I had like a 0.001% chance because I had nothing to lose. Whereas the union would look at whether we had a chance, whether we have an argument. So we do have control over whether something goes to the final level of appeal. Now, why this is different, because we've had to take to arbitration times where people have been denied sick leave. And why this is different and why this is costing the union more money is that the onus shifts now. Before, when we had a sick leave plan and sick leave credits, if the employer wanted to challenge that, they had to prove that you weren't sick. Now, in order for somebody to qualify for short-term disability benefits, we have to prove that they were sick. So now we've got the burden, we have to do the work. And so that's why it's more work for us, it is more costly. And we have concerns that, you know, some members will not book off because, one, they have the waiting period. People don't, it's just a daunting thing to fill out. There's forms that you have to fill out. There's employee statement, there's attending physician statement. So it's a more daunting task. So one of the things that for our advice to all of you is, if you can avoid the short-term disability plan, do it. Do it no matter what. If you need documents or whatever to help convince your members to stay away from this, let us know. We put out a lot of bulletins, a lot of fact sheets to our members and preparing them for negotiations to fight against the short-term disability benefit. So some of our members think we kind of sold them out for agreeing to it, but we can help provide you that. But if you do find yourself, like us, in a position where it's either fight to the death and come out with a collective agreement that has 1/4 of the rights that we had and no defined benefit pension plan, or negotiate a collective agreement that has a short-term disability plan, there's two things that I would recommend to you. Capture as much of the language in the collective agreement as you possibly can. The other unions weren't able to do that, and what happens then is Canada Post has the control. We were able to do that, captured most of the language in the collective agreement, so we were able to fight some of this stuff. So for example, Canada Post, as I had said to you, there's a 7-day calendar waiting period unless you're hospitalized. And Canada Post policy was that if you were hospitalized, even if it was for day surgery, it had to be medically necessary. I'm saying, excuse me, that was never discussed during negotiations. That's not what's in the collective agreement. So we were able to push them back on some of that stuff. So that's why it's important to capture that language. If you have to accept it, capture it in the collective agreement. And then if you're doing either you have to have a mechanism for challenging the decisions, and it has to be an external mechanism, whether it's grievance arbitration or it is an appeal process. And if you're having an appeal process, have specialists, not just occupational health specialists, because their specialty is how do we get the worker back to work faster, as opposed to, do I know why this person is ill, and are they getting the right treatment? Does it make sense that they should be off as long as they are? So that we find is very helpful. And so I know I went faster than, I think I did. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation. If you have some questions.
I think we should do both presentations.
Do both presentations?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take about 10-15 minutes as well. I just want to add that the rural mail carriers is a different collective agreement. We had, I was the chief negotiator. It was imposed by an arbitrator through arbitration, and we ended up improving that plan through what Kathy just described, because they've only been unionized since 2004. So what I'm going to talk about is, okay, you know, we agreed to $19 an hour for new hires instead of 22, 23. We agreed to this short-term disability with a gun to our heads because they had final offer arbitration on the table, which we had never faced before. Just in case you don't know, final offer arbitration is basically the arbitrator takes their package or ours, not a combination of what he or she thinks is the best of both. So we'd never been faced with that, and obviously they were putting in names of arbitrators that would have given the Conservative government what they want. That's what this was all about. And we went from 55 and 30 for full pension to 60 and 30. I mean, and I'm going to get into some numbers for you so you can see how many millions of dollars they're going to save with this stuff, but it's not enough, right? They want 8,000 more of our jobs, as they've taken, what, 20,000 away from the public sector? So, I mean, that's what I'm going to talk about a bit here. And you know, this is happening around the world. You know, in France and in the US, they've maintained Saturday delivery for now. But in New Zealand, they've gone to every second-day delivery. And I just want to give you some numbers. This is a research document book written by Chris Herman, and it's called The Liberalization of European Postal Markets and the Impact on Employment and Working Conditions. So the first paragraph, it's just a summary of it, says the only places that haven't seen job loss are Slovenia, Luxembourg, and Iceland. We've lost as many as 40 to 50% of the jobs, from between 20 and 30 and 40 and 50% of postal jobs where they've privatized. And that's going to be one of the main points I'm making here. What they're doing here is that they don't want to take away door-to-door delivery, they want to give it to the private sector. Now let me give you some numbers here. In the Netherlands, 34,000 near full-time jobs lost at Deutsche Post, compared to 22,000 part-time jobs created by the new competitors. In Germany, the former monopolist has cut 38,000 mostly full-time jobs in the letter market since '99, while the new market entrants, private sector, have created 16,308 versus 38,000 full-time jobs that we've lost. In Sweden, 1,740 full-time equivalent jobs created by the new competitors, and that's since 1996, by the way, because I was there in '96 to look at what was happening there, compared to 12,000 jobs eliminated in Swedish Post between '98 and 2008. In Spain, 4,000 job losses at the former monopolist are offset by an equal number of jobs created by the new competitors. However, most of the new created jobs are part-time. And when we say part-time, it's also mostly non-union. And non-union means, you know how letter carriers are working in Europe now? They're sorting your mail or people's mail on their kitchen tables at minimum wage, no pension, no holidays, no benefits. And that's what they're doing to the Public Service Alliance, and not only in Canada, but around the world as these free trade agreements move forward. So the objective is deregulation and privatization. Who is a francophone here? Anybody see l'enquête yesterday about Lac Mégantic? Hey, did you see that? So now there's this is like a W5 mainly out of Quebec, but francophones in Canada can obviously watch this program. And they had a special yesterday about Lac Mégantic. And the company that went bankrupt, that killed 47 people in Lac Mégantic, they were sent letters from Transport Canada on a continuous basis saying you can't have just one engineer in the train, and the tracks are all rusted and they're falling apart and all that stuff. So what's happening now? Lac Mégantic suing the Canadian government. That's what privatization does, right? It puts it in the hands of the private sector. They have more control than the government. And this ends up happening. And now our government's going to have to pay for what they did in Lac Mégantic because they've just walked away. All they had to do is declare bankruptcy. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening to your jobs. That's what's happening to our jobs. And we need to fight this stuff leading up to the next election. So as far as the pensions are concerned, I want to mention that a bit. You know, does anybody believe that these low interest rates are just a coincidence? In the 1980s, they had high interest rates for those of us who remember and had a mortgage at the time where the friggin' mortgage rates went up to 20%. Now they bring them down as the GM and the financial institutions in the States and Europe and the banks are paying back all this money they stole from the government because of the crash. That's why they're keeping the interest rates low. And in the meantime, they're stealing our pensions like they were stealing our houses back in the 80s, right? So at Canada Post, they're saying that the solvency deficit is $6.5 billion. It's no longer that because the interest rates in 2013 have done well. They just haven't given us the numbers yet. But what does that mean, $6.5 billion? Me as a postal worker, I've got my full years in. I'm on my 38th year, 35 years. I think you're the same. 2% a year, maxed out, 5 best years. I'm supposed to get 70% of a letter carrier wage for the rest of my life after I leave. So at $6.5 billion, it's funded at 72% of the max, what I just described. So if they were to shut down tomorrow, if they were to shut down tomorrow, they're not, I would get 72% of 70% for the rest of my life. Unless we can fight and make, under law, say that the government's responsible for the difference, that's what would happen. So Canada Post is not going to pay for this. I am. Kathy is. And they'll do the same thing to your pension if you don't stop this, this conservative government. Now, what have we seen as postal workers? You know, Kathy just described the last round of negotiations, but leading up to that, they introduced tech change where letter carriers no longer sort their mail because it's done by machines. They've taken away all these services, priority courier delivery in the morning, no more. We used to look up apartment units, no more. We used to not deliver mail when people have moved or people have died. They now put in a policy since 2008, preparing for all these tech change because they don't want to give us time to do the work. We deliver mail even if we know they're gone, unless the people give us back the mail. So, you know, we take pride in our work. So we leave this mail there. You know the person's passed away. It's still their children that are living there, and you're supposed to leave the letter. I'm not saying we do this. We do the work for nothing now. We look up the apartment units. We still deliver the mail. We just don't get time for it anymore. Hence, we've lost like over 6,000 jobs since December 2007. So, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they've hit us with. And the reason I'm telling you that is I'm going to put numbers to these because they're telling you that the post office has no money. Well, they're going to be saving, from what Kathy told you, and from what I just talked about, they're going to be saving hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the increase in the stamp that's coming. So what are they doing here? Again, I need to repeat it. They're setting the stage for privatization. If the Conservatives get back in, you will be getting door-to-door delivery from FedEx and UPS and perhaps Pitney Bowes, where the CEO of Canada Post comes from. That's what's being set up as what I described in Europe in that memo I was reading. So the last round, I already mentioned, $19 an hour. Kathy just talked about the STDP. I'm not going to mention it again. Now, what does that mean financially? As far as the tech changes are concerned, they were predicting a saving of $250 million a year with all the jobs that they were cutting. Well, we just had a meeting with the upper echelons of Canada Post in December. It's $270 million that they're saving as of 2013. And they haven't even touched BC and many parts of Canada and Quebec. So that's year after year, right? They're saying we bought, what is it, $1.5 billion in machines. Well, how long is it going to take them to pay for the machines at $270 million saving a year? A few years, and then that's money in their pocket that we should be using to improve postal services. The pensions, as you know, Flaherty has passed the law. They want to increase from 40 to 50% our contributions. Well, that's already coming. That's an $80 million saving a year for Canada Post. The wage freeze in 2016, $40 million a year. A stamp increase of $1, based on the stats that they've given us through negotiations in the past, we estimate that's an increase of about $600 million a year, understanding that volumes are decreasing and that. So they're saying it's $200 million. We know it's going to be a lot more than that. And they've been given a letter of credit for the pensions that they don't have to pay the solvency deficit until 2018. That's worth $1.2 billion a year right there. And we don't know, like I was asking Kathy just before the meeting, how much are they going to save with all this stuff in the STDP? We've asked the questions, they still haven't told us. So all that to say, just the increase in stamps alone, they could extend door-to-door delivery to the 5 million houses that don't get it and have money left over, let alone all the savings that I'm talking about here. So it's important to understand the misinformation that they're putting out in the public to justify the busting of the union, taking away jobs, and going to a lac mégantic type of postal service or a European type of postal service. Or I don't need to convince you guys. You know what's going on as far as moving it away from democratically elected governments into the hands of the Walmarts, Exxons, and the private sector. So I've already talked, like this, what we're talking about is 8,000 jobs that they want to take away on top of the 6,000 to 7,000 we've already lost. If we were to increase or expand door-to-door delivery and pay for it with what I just talked about, that's over 7,000 jobs that we could create across Canada and Quebec if we were to go in the other direction. And they're lying about the number of people that get centralized delivery. It's not 63%. It's 25% when you take out apartment units where people don't have to go outside to a frozen box and snow banks and everything else. They've included in their 63% the rural boxes, which I have at home. I live on Dwyer Hill Road, west of here. Well, that's home delivery. It's at the end of my laneway, you know. So those numbers are wrong. If they were to get away with this, the increase of people driving and walking to get their mail would be 132%. There's an environmental impact. There's littering. There's, like, we've sent out pictures now. People throw the mail all over the place. It's on your front lawn. And there's theft. Articles out of British Columbia and other parts of the country. Over 5,000 vandalized boxes. Mail stolen on a regular basis. These two articles talk about the RCMP knocking on doors to let people know that they're getting their mail and their identity stolen out of these boxes. So last October at national consultation, because we take these to consultation all the time. So they tell us, okay, we're going to start buying American boxes because they're a lot safer. So first question is, well, is mail getting stolen out of those? And they go, oh, we don't know. How much does it cost to buy these boxes? We don't know. So they don't want to tell us anything. So I write the American unions, letter carriers, rural carriers. So we got a few reports back. Now in California, they've been basically cutting the legs off the boxes and just taking the whole box and stealing the mail out of it wherever it's convenient for them, right? So just so you know that, I know they tell you that everybody thinks this is the best thing to slice bread and everybody loves their super mailboxes. It's bullshit. The locks freeze all the time. People can't get to them. And I'm not even getting into what you've all heard about the elderly and people that have limitation fonctionnelle. So I'll leave it at that on that. We've got solutions. I've given you documents, but we've got a banking study that we've done. And by the way, in the summary of this study done by the Center for Policy Alternatives, the money marts of the world charge as much as, you know how much when they lend poor people money from pay to pay? 800 and some % interest. We don't need a better public banking in Canada because the banks are really taking care of us. And that's only a short part. If you get a chance to download this, a lot of good information. We've been promoting it a lot with our piggy there. You can see a picture. We've done demos all over. I've given you a copy of the petitions, letters to the MPs, and this sign here, Save Canada Post, is for people to put up in their front windows at their homes. Everything's in both languages. We've been knocking on doors. I was in Canada this weekend. We're giving out all this information. We hit we hit 7 different sectors with letter carriers and brothers and sisters from the 3 levels of the union. And I can tell you from my own experience, we had one person refuse to sign of the hundreds of houses that we knocked on and got answers to. One person refused to sign and refused the information. That was it. Yeah, a couple of others refused to sign, but they all took the information, and we're going to stop this. As far as we're concerned, we are going to stop this. This is a trial balloon. They're going to maybe try and put a few in before the next election. They're not that stupid as to put it in before the next election. But if Harper's reelected, look out, then we're going to be in serious trouble. I think the Conservatives are in trouble, and that's why they're trying to jam all this stuff through. And I one last thing. They're not getting rid of door-to-door delivery. They're not. I've told you what happened in Europe. Those companies are delivering mail to the door. What Harper is doing here is they're trying to take Canada Post out of the picture. Then they'll deregulate, and the UPSs and FedExs are going to charge you $2, $3 a letter to deliver mail to the door. That's what they're doing here. No doubt about it. Thank you.
Just one more thing before I turn to questions. There was a recent article from Black Box that through access to information, they got a study that Canada Post had done over a number of years on providing financial services. And it was discovered, not only was it considered a win for Canada Post and win for the country, but it was going to, like the other postal industries, increase revenue.